Welcome, everybody. Hey, hey, hello, hello. It's been a crazy week, crazy day, crazy month, crazy time to be in.
It's crazy time to be alive. It is, really
Crazy
is.
time to be alive. Today's a special Love Remembers Live. Um, we have a very honored guest, Zev. A lot of you guys know Zev Shalev. He's on Substack. He's here bringing a lot of investigative reporting, independent reporting for years. He also partners up with some of the stars here, like Olga, Dean Burrell. So Zev is somebody that I've been watching. I go just put it this way: when I have some free time, I always jump into Zev's Substack and see he's always up to breaking some stuff, talking about, explaining it, and giving it. So I'm honored to him. So I want to welcome you. Thank you for coming. Thank you, because I think this is a very interesting subject.
Well, thank you, Lev. I'm a big fan of yours too, and I can't believe the amount of hours you put in here. And I know it's because you really care and you really believe in what you're doing, and it shows in everything that you're doing. So it's an honor for me to be here because I think you've got so much valuable information that we can cross-reference in the next while about Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, there's you were in the zone, as it were, for a lot of the stuff as it was happening. So I'd be really interested to see where all of this comes together at the end of the show.
Yeah, and I'm excited also because for those of you that know, I'm not a Jeffrey Epstein expert. I mean, I don't know all the stuff. I did not go, I was busy with my own case at the time when he got arrested. It was around the same time, 2019, and whenever his thing. So I was not interested. Plus, I think he's a disgusting man, but I know enough about it. And the whole thing about it is I know enough that's going on behind the scenes, and I know enough about what the people that are involved and the way what they're doing and the reasons why they're doing it. So I'm definitely excited to hear some of the information, because I want to give you a quick little background of Zev when it comes to Epstein. About 6 years ago, Zev aired the first investigation into the Epstein while Epstein was still alive, folks. He broke the intelligence connections, the financial crimes, and the systematic blackmail when no one else would touch the story, because that's the whole thing. And the Epstein story is so toxic from every side, that it's like most people want to stay away. And Zev has been on it from the very beginning, before even Epstein committed suicide, killed himself. We're going to talk about it because of that, because tonight Zev has told me he's going to, reveal some evidence to us that's going to prove how this entire official narrative, from sex crimes to suicide, was all a big, counterintelligence operation in American history. And I am extremely curious because, a lot of people, when they hear Epstein, they right away connect it to sex crimes, child
Yeah.
trafficking, which is the disgusting and and I think that's not even disputed by anybody now. I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison. Epstein, there's enough information for him to have gone. That's why they indicted him, and we'll get into a lot of because I'll tell you an interesting part. For those of you who don't know, one of the a Dominican gentleman that was serving time with me in Otisville. Prior to him coming over to Otisville, he was serving time at MDC
Yeah.
with Epstein.
Well, that's
And
interesting.
he was actually the first one, because he was on cleanup duty. He was the
Hmm.
first one to clean Epstein's cell after his death. And he also, I've never spoken about this, and he told me, so we're going to discuss some of these stories
That's really
also
interesting.
today. So yeah, definitely. Zeb, let me just bring the crowd, the audience, up to speed, so
Mm,
we know where we are right now,
mm.
what's happening, and why this is an extremely important story. Because a lot of people on the left, especially, they lately I've been hearing hey, enough of this. We've heard too much. Enough. This is not something important. I want to make very clear, this is extremely, extremely important.
Mm.
Remember where I came from. I was one of the original, they say, OG Mega. I was part of, how Mega was built. I was there in
Yeah.
in its infinite stages, and part of, putting it together. The Epstein conspiracy has been in our like bylaws, mega, how you want to pronounce it, bylaws
Mm.
for since the inception. It was always the connections to the Clintons. It was always the connections to the deep state. It was always part of the child pornography, pedophilia, Democrat. That's where QAnon came from
Mm.
with the blood and all that. So this is not just something to us normal people. Yes, this is a story, a disgusting story, and might be more interesting because what we're going to hear from Zev today. But to MAGA, this is their lie. And
Right.
I'm not talking, and I want to make it very clear for everybody out there. We're not talking about everybody that voted for Donald Trump, because there's a lot of people voted for different reasons. Some people voted for their personal reasons, like cryptocurrency or taxes, and didn't care about who Donald Trump is and didn't even care to find out. Others did it because they didn't like the Democrats or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. There was plenty of it, but there's the core base, which is the MAGA cult. And that cult, if you guys have been watching, reading my Substacks, listening to Olga and Zev on what we've been reporting, that the cult hasn't been cracking. Yes, you've been seeing, like Elon Musk and others, but that's not the cult. These are people that came in that are there for their own personal interests. You saw people that are started going away from because of tariffs, because of his flip-flopping on Israel and the Middle East, about the way he's been doing Russia, Israel. So there's a lot of reasons, why people have been flip-flopping Congress, but his MAGA base has never flip-flopped. They were always hardcore, and that's why I call it a cult. That's why, because to them, it's not about what's going on, it's about their leader. And this is the first time we're seeing major crack. A major crack to this point that even they right now, as we're speaking right now, there's probably 2, 3 spaces on Twitter, which is going on right now with probably thousands of people on there, all hardcore mega cultists that I've spent years of debating, arguing, screaming with, that right now are up there. And if you would listen, your hair would fall. You wouldn't believe what they're saying. I mean, they're really turning on the whole Donald Trump theory about Cash Patel, all of these people, Pam Bondi. I can't even explain to you to what degree. That's why it's extremely important, because if we're ever going to stop Donald Trump, save our democracy, get back to where we're able to debate, vote, and have our differences, we need to right now join forces and make sure this man. And that's why I thought today, with everything that's happening, that's why I'm honored to have Zev here, because and maybe he could give us some more light, because most people talk about sex trafficking, like I said, but there's a lot more to it.
Yeah.
Epstein was involved with a lot of stuff, and I'm going to hand it off to you in 1 second, because I want to just
Yeah.
say that today also, just to confirm, because I could confirm to all of you that there's, maybe, when they say list, it's the same thing when they had the, what's it called? Signal gate, and they
Yeah.
called it was a war
Operations plan.
war,
Yeah.
operation. Same thing here. This is technical. If there's a list, a list is information. There was
Mm.
videos of bribery. I mean, of blackmail. There was sexual videos. There were lists of contacts, people. So exactly, word games, Dimitri. That's what it is. What word sound. But there was information that for the past several years, Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, Cash Patel, especially Dan Bongino. I mean, they had podcasts. They made
Yeah.
millions and millions of dollars.
Made the careers.
Made careers. Literally, Black Book, that Gazelle Max. I mean, there's information. All of this information is there. And all of a sudden, Trump decided to squash it. And we're going to get towards the end of why and my reasons, my context. But I want you to talk about. But before I get it off, and right now, literally a few hours ago, I don't know if you've seen it, Alan Dershowitz came out.
Yeah, I saw that.
You saw that, and he confirmed also. He said there is a list. I saw the names, the videos.
Yeah, he says there's names that have been suppressed. Yes.
And exactly, he said
Yeah.
the names have been suppressed.
Yeah.
The only person that could have suppressed it is Donald Trump, folks, because he can't blame Joe Biden on this one. He can't blame, because he's in control. He has all
Yeah.
the reins. Zev,
Well, some of
take
the
it away.
suppression did come from the judges themselves, who didn't want a lot of this information out. But there's sort of many sides to Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was not just a sex exploiter. That was one of the things he did in order to but that was sort of a side thing he did almost to secure the other stuff he was doing. The other stuff he was doing was financial crimes. He used to call himself a bounty hunter for people, and he used to describe how for rich people, he would get money that was lost or stolen, and he was able to retrieve it. But as it turns out, a lot of what he did, like he did with Towers Financial, you remember this guy named Steve Hoffenberg. Steve was the CEO, chairman of Towers, and he hired Jeffrey Epstein as an advisor to Towers. But it was in a special kind of advisor role, because what they were trying to do is really turn this company, which had become a bit of a Ponzi scheme, and bankrupt it. They wanted to bring it down. Now, maybe that wasn't so clear to Stephen, but it certainly was what Epstein was trying to do. And then he did succeed in doing it. Ultimately, Hoffenberg went to jail for 18 years for a crime that he says Epstein actually devised and came up with. But it's that little model that has always intrigued me, that, Epstein was always in these companies where he would go in, he would collapse them, and then he would always end up getting a bit of money at the end of it. So that's one side of his, this other financial crime side of him. Then there's the espionage side of him. And this is where, 6 years ago, I stumbled onto the story by accident. I was just doing something like this on YouTube, like a two-way show, and we wanted to start a podcast. So we thought, well, let's do a series. Let's find a good topic to do a series on. And Jeffrey Epstein seemed like a good enough topic. 5 days before the series began, Epstein was arrested and landed up going to jail. So the timing was pretty good, because we had already done a lot of research. We were ready to go. About 3 or 4 weeks into this series, he was dead. And so during that time, we were the only people really reporting in depth as to what was going on. And we had sources like Hoffenberg, who was still very close to Epstein and to Epstein's team, who were telling us what was going on inside MCC. Who was telling us that actually at the end there, Epstein was giving up names. He was talking to prosecutors about what he knew. And that's possibly the reason why he was killed. He was giving away a lot of the information about his espionage side. And so that was really intrigued me, because I thought, well, that's something we've got to nail. If he was a spy, who was he spy for? And there were a lot of possibilities. Some people had said he was a CIA agent. Some people said he was MI6. Some people said it was KGB. And some people thought he was Israeli. But, it was really hard to nail down. Those are not the kind of things you can just go and look up in a directory or do a perplexity search for. You just didn't find that information out. But Hoffenberg told me almost off the cuff one day, as I was talking to him about a whole bunch of other things. He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, why wouldn't you tell me who he spied for?" He said, "You really want to know?" And I was like, "Yeah, just tell me." And he said, "Israel." And I was blown away when he said the word Israel, because I'm Israeli. I was born in Israel, and I never think of Israel as conducting spy or espionage activities against America. I'd never think of that as other than there's one example of Pollard, but I never thought, there'd be the sophisticated espionage campaign going on. But I was like, okay, I'll put that in my back pocket. I can't go with one source on that. I'll just think about that. And, I was building information to try and figure out how to prove that. And then a few weeks later, I was able to get an interview with Ari Ben-Manashi, who was the handler of Robert Maxwell back in the Iran-Contra days. He's kind of a famous spy figure in the world. Now, he also is a bit compromised. He works for a bunch of other people. But he invited me to Montreal, where he told me on the record that Epstein was a spy for the Israelis. He worked for Israeli military intelligence, the same arm that he was a commander in years earlier when he was working with Maxwell. And he gave me, the exact reason that they said that they were doing it, and that Epstein was sent into America was to stop Clinton. There's a big fear amongst the Israelis that Clinton would become another Carter, a very left-wing, very left-leaning, pro-Palestinian guy, and they did not want him to do that. So they sent Epstein in really as to compromise him, to get close to him, to compromise him through money, and to compromise him through other means. And I would say in some regards, that turned out to be very successful. Epstein became one of Clinton's closest friends in some ways, and also financial advisors in terms of setting up the Clinton Foundation. But that's where you get a lot of the Clinton stuff. I'll just say one quickly thing before I just wrap up this little section. But there's the reason why there are so many Democrats in this list, in the so-called list, is because what Epstein and Ghislaine were doing was they were trying to blackmail Democrats. They were trying to get compromise on the Democrats because they were fearing that the Democrats were going to be too left-leaning. So that's what they needed the dirt on them for. So you don't see a lot of Republicans going down to the island, and you don't see a lot of Republicans on this list because that wasn't the target. The target was Democrats. The target was about Clinton, making sure that there wasn't going to be a giant peace deal with the Israelis and the Palestinians. And that's why it looks to everyone from the outside like it's some sort of democratic cabal. But it's not. What it really is Epstein going after the Democrats to try and compromise them in order to have a greater leveraging power if there ever was a negotiation with them on Israel.
Well, let me ask you before we move on to different
Mm.
topics, because some of the things that I've been hearing, and maybe you could tell us here, is that it wasn't just the Democrats, but and some Republicans. Well, first of all, let's also remember that Donald Trump was a Democrat at the
Yeah.
time. He was not a Republican, so it
Right.
would make sense why he would be on the list. And we know he's on the list. That's 100% that he's been on the flight logs. He's been friends with Epstein. Epstein's been to Mar-a-Lago. Today, I was on JoJo from New Jersey, and she even broke some stuff I heard about, saying that Don Jr. called him Uncle Jeffrey at some points when kids were growing up. So, I mean, they definitely had a relationship. They also came from that mindset. It's just that it's like, back in that day, Donald Trump even said himself, he had those, Miss Universe pageants, and he'd walk in on these young girls while they're changing because, he could do that. He always, made comments on Howard Stern about liking them young and all of that. So, again, we don't need to have a smoking gun, as they say it, or we have use common sense, and we could see that if it's thunder outside and that we come out and it's wet all over the place, we could say it rained. We don't
We
have to see
can.
the actual rain come down.
We could also
So,
say something else, though, because here's the thing. Trump, I don't think, ever went to Epstein Island. He was never a victim of the blackmail. For Trump, he was more like a parallel figure to Epstein. They were operating in the very same way, in very similar circles. In fact, the one big tell there that I keep finding so fascinating is for the last 6 years, between 2013 and 2018, they both banked at Deutsche Bank, at the wealthy clients section of Deutsche Bank. Now, there's a reason for that. Deutsche Bank went after people that were rich but couldn't get funding anywhere else because they were a little bit on the dangerous to loan side. And in Trump's case, he'd lost a lot of money and needed these new loans. And in Epstein's case, he had been convicted of this child abuse. So, no bank wanted to deal with him. But somehow Deutsche Bank found a way to accommodate both. And it just strikes me as being really interesting that their financial careers started aligning with Bear Stearns, with Ace Greenberg at Bear Stearns. And they both sort of ended their interactions with each other at the end there with Deutsche Bank. And there's a lot more linking them between the two.
wow,
But
you just said something crazy because I have a little story with Bear Stearns and Ace Greenberg.
oh,
Ace
yeah,
Greenberg, yeah, actually, Ace Greenberg. That's how I got into Wall Street. As a kid, I used to sell the New York. A little story quickly, folks.
yeah, no, it's amazing.
When I was a young child, at 14, 15 years old, we used to hustle, and me and my cousin used to sell on the phone the New York Post, Daily News, and we'd make 5-6 cents a copy.
Yeah.
It was 25-cent newspaper, and there was this one guy I would always call up. And I would constantly pitch him every day to buy the newspaper. He'd make me go through this hour pitch, never buy the newspaper. Finally, one day I left. I left on to doing other things. I actually went to Russia at the time to do stuff as I was getting older. And my cousin stayed behind. When I fast forwarded 3 years later, when I met my cousin, or 4 years later, after not seeing him for all this time, he drives up in this Lamborghini or Ferrari at the time, it was a red Ferrari. And I was like, who did you kill? He's like, Wall Street. I go, Wall Street? We're Brooklyn kids. Like, how'd you get into Wall Street? He goes, remember that the old dude that you were pitching all the time to buy? Well, when he left, finally, like a week later, this is how sometimes fate has it.
Yeah.
A week later, that guy happened to tell my cousin, enough with the pitchy, thinking it was me.
Oh,
It was like, yeah. And so
I stole your Lamborghini.
he goes, come on in. It was Ace Greenberg. Ace Greenberg brought him into Bear Stearns, and my cousin started working for Ace and Green also.
What year was that? Do you remember the year?
This was, I'll tell you, 88, maybe 89.
I think Epstein was there at the same time or similar time.
Wow.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I'll have to go back and look at the timeline. But
Please, I'd be
yeah,
that's
because
even
Epstein was also a young guy that Aceberg sort of picked up out of, had no career, no history in any of this. He was a math teacher or something like that, and suddenly, out of the blue, he became a senior broker. And I think Ace Greenberg did a lot of what you're talking about, finding young guys with, who looked smart and who had potential and turned them. Yeah. So that's really interesting to hear. Ace Greenberg, of course, was larger than life.
yeah.
He was this huge character on Wall Street, and he was Donald Trump's number one banker of choice. He would, anytime Donald Trump needed anything, he would call Ace Greenberg, and Ace would often find him things that he needed. In Epstein's case, it didn't last so long. In Epstein's case, it lasted about a year or so that he was at Bear Stearns until he was fired for what looked like financial irregularities with the Seagram's family, with the Bronfman family. And and so that's the end of his career, we thought, at Bear Stearns. But actually, one of the things we're discovering now, as I'm going back through all this data, is that actually he never really left Bear Stearns. He left officially, but he had an offshore, offshore with Bear Stearns called Liquid Financial, which years later actually got a bailout from the federal government. And I'll go into that in a story next week on Narativ. But it is interesting that we're still finding out fresh information about Epstein because of this thing that the Department of Justice has put out, saying that, none of the stuff about Epstein is true. There's nothing to see here. All of us are going back into our files. We're looking back at our histories here and realizing that there is a lot more that still hasn't been told about these guys. And it's fascinating to be able to do that now. And it's, frankly, very destructive to the Trump administration. I'm sure this is the last thing they wanted to happen.
Well, not only that, I want to read a letter right now to you folks. This is February 27th, 2025. This letter is from then she just became Attorney General Pam Bondi, and she was writing to who just became the FBI Director Kash Patel.
It's so funny.
Now, these are the two people that have pushed the propaganda on the Epstein file and promised Mega that the first thing that they do is they're going to release the file. So this is the letter she writes. This is an internal letter. This is incredible. Before you came into, Dear Director Patel, before you came into office, because she was confirmed before him, I requested the full and complete files related to Jeffrey Epstein. In response to this request, I received approximately 200 pages of documents, which consisted primarily of flight logs and Epstein's list of contacts. So there are lists. I mean,
it's a contact list I think we've all seen, probably.
Yeah, I mean, we see so. And the list of victims' names and phone numbers. More lists. I repeatedly questioned whether this was a full set of documents responsive to my request and was repeatedly assured by the FBI that we had received a full set of documents. Late yesterday, I learned from a source that the FBI field office in New York was in possession of thousands of pages of documents related to the investigation of the indictment of Epstein. So now we got thousands of pages. Despite my repeated requests, the FBI never disclosed the existence of these files. When you and I spoke yesterday, you were just as surprised as I was to learn this new information happened. So, folks, they had this conversation and they said, okay, now after this, write this letter to me.
Yeah.
And she's like, to document what we're going to do or how this is going to go down or what's going to happen. This is how corrupt these people are. And this just gives me flashbacks of when we used to be in Washington doing our Ukraine stuff. By 8 a.m. tomorrow, February 28th, the FBI will deliver the full and complete Epstein files to my office, including all records, documents, audio, video, recordings, material related to Jeffrey Epstein and his clients, regardless of how much information was obtained. There will be no withholdings or limitations to my or your access.
That's interesting. that the FBI withheld the stuff. But the thing is, we're not going to find Donald Trump's name in the way everyone thinks we're going to find Donald Trump's name. There's no doubt in my mind that they did things together, and that there was that one indictment where there was a young woman or young girl involved in a horrific sexual act with both of them. But what we are going to be able to see, and because this is what we documented in the series 6 years ago, is how close Epstein and Trump were. I mean, if you look at a map between Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach to Epstein's home, it's 1.7 miles away. It is literally a 3 to 5 minute drive between the two of them. They would spend a lot of time with each other. Every time Trump had his club open, anytime he had an event, Epstein was there. And so was Epstein's Ghislaine, and so was all these other people. And at his house, Epstein's house, it always had people there as well. Some of them were young women who were giving these massages, but some of them were not. He would just be a very social guy. So these two guys were big partiers in the 90s. They were together all the time. It's not like they were just together a little bit. They were out. There's one video of them in that one party with like 28 other women in the Mar-a-Lago. But this was their lifestyle. They
That was
compared.
Donald Trump. People forget that. People forget that this was Donald Trump before he became president or whatever you want to.
He still is a little like that, but I mean, he has a guy
He's a lot like that.
who's been accused of rape so many times. And because he's been accused of rape so many times, he's probably, has done some raping, one would imagine. And the same with Epstein. I mean, these guys this was their lifestyle of choice. The only thing I'd say about Epstein, by the way, is that most people tell me he was gay. And, in fact, it just adds to this whole notion of him being a spy, because it was just necessary for him to do all these things. It wasn't that he was really after these women or anything like that. In fact, in the deposition involving Trump and Epstein, not to get too personal about this, or I don't know if I could talk about this here, but he couldn't really get it up in that video, in that deposition. It was Trump who's involved the most, because in Epstein's world, my understanding is that he was involved with Wexner for a long time in a relationship. So now I don't know if that precludes him from doing any of these other things, but it also explains why he never ultimately married Ghislaine, which was sort of the plan earlier on in their relationship. I'm probably including too many divergent points in here in one point. So
I think you're making a lot of great, information is key. I mean, everybody could make their decisions. I mean, I think you're making some really good points when it comes to that one young, and I think, and that always bothered me, because everybody looks over it, except for that one young girl that with that salacious act that both Trump and Epstein were accused of being together. And I think that, one of the things could be in there that proof of that, but again, I don't think so, because again, we have to keep in mind, and this is what I was going to say, that a lot of this stuff that we're trying to relive and everything, remember, it was also the Biden administration had it, the Trump administration had. So if there was stuff that Donald Trump was linked to illegally, I probably think that Merrick Garland or they would have went after him a lot harder. They would have. There's something would have. I would have to imagine that. No,
there was nothing that I could find in all my research that actually directly links them in any financial dealings with each other. There is the one time where they were both bidding on a property, the old Wexner property in Palm Beach, where Donald Trump outbid Jeffrey Epstein, and it sort of is the reason they maybe ended their friendship. And he got this property called La Mettie on Palm Beach. And as it turned out there, the money that he used to buy the property probably came from the Russians, because a few years later, he sold it to the Russians, to Rabobliev, the oligarch who lives in, where does he live? He lives in that nice
which one?
Rabobliev.
Rubio.
Yeah.
Where he lives in Florida? You're saying?
No, he lives in a place where there's he's got his famous soccer team in Europe. But he was the person who actually funded Donald Trump's purchase of that house, and then a few years later, he bought it for $50 million more than he had paid originally. So it was a bit of a way for the Russians to fund Donald Trump during his financial downtime was to buy this property and then buy it again at a much higher price a few years later. So that's sort of well documented. But the stuff that happened between Russia and Donald Trump is sort of one story, and the stuff that Epstein was involved in was another story. Except that they were such close friends. And the thing that I find fascinating more than anything else is that they were both so good at making money out of bankruptcies. Donald Trump collapsed these businesses several times over in a way to make money, and not necessarily because he was just losing it, but he figured out a way to become liquid after that and move on. And he was sort of a bankruptcy king in some ways. Well, Epstein too was always around these bankruptcies. So whether it was Drexel, or whether it was Bear Stearns, or whether it was Towers Financial, or even around the Mirror Group where Maxwell stole a lot of money, Epstein was always in the middle of those things as those companies were collapsing. And Hoffenberg told me that was his expertise. Epstein's expertise was bringing down these major corporations, sometimes even crashing the market or precipitating the crash of the market. So his genius, as it were, as people always said he was a genius, was being able to go into companies and really financially self-destruct them, if you will, collapse them, and then always walk away with some money. Always a very similar amount of money, of 450 million in each time. So there's this interesting number that keeps recurring in a lot of the Epstein history. But I think that was his fee. I think that's what he got paid a lot of these times to collapse these companies. Now, I know that's all new information for people. People only really know him as the sex guy,
Well,
but there was.
I was gonna say, and that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to move on, because one of the things I'm also hearing from my sources that Donald Trump didn't stop this because of him fearing that there's some fallacious stuff, sex stuff that's going to come out about him. What the reason why he did do it, and we'll get to that in a second. A lot of you I see are writing there that you guys want to see the letter. I promise you, I'll put together a Substack letter.
Is that a new letter, by the way? That just came out today, that letter?
That letter, one of my sources sent it to me.
Okay. I thought it was something that's before. Oh, that's great.
Oh, it's been out. It's been out. I haven't seen it. So one of my sources sent it to me prior to the show. They actually sent it to me and said, "Listen, take a look at this. This was actually internally. This was an internal letter between Pam Bondi and the DOJ and the FBI, between Bondi and Patel. They were documenting the procedures of getting, because at that time there was a big stink about that supposedly the Biden leftovers, because this is just when they took over. We're holding back and the FBI holding back all of this thousands of Epstein documents in the Southern District of New York."
So she acknowledges in that letter that there are thousands of pages. She's not saying it's nothing. She's like she did in the press conference the other day. She's saying that there's thousands of pages of documents, which are more than the contact list and more than the abusers list. So that's really interesting. That
and the approach that she took on the videos, because prior to that, she's made statements, and also Alina Habba, one of his Trump's lawyers, and who is also now the prosecuting attorney general, whatever, of New Jersey, interim, whatever her position is. So they all made statements, basically saying that there's prosecutions that are going to come, that the videos, and yesterday she said, "You're never going to see any of these videos. You're never going to see any evidence. Everything, we're going to destroy everything. Basically, you're not going to see any of it." And the other thing I'm hearing, and this is what I wanted to touch hear a little bit from you, because I'm trying to connect some of the dots myself, is that I don't know for a fact who he's covering up for, but I was told that Trump is definitely covering up for some people. Now, right away, I assumed it was financial. So right away, I thought to myself, there's probably people on this list that are financial, that he's trying to maybe make money, because I know Trump is very transactional. But something that when I spoke to you earlier today, and that's something that you mentioned in some of your reporting, and that's what I want to talk to you about, and also is his, that his realistic connections of actually maybe working for Israel. Why I'm saying that to you, and I'm Jewish, and I'm not here to try to stir, but the truth is important, and we need to, it doesn't matter who's it for. That's one thing that we all stand here and brings us together. And the visit from Netanyahu, coincided with how
Yeah.
this all played out, and then the letter from Netanyahu to Trump about the Nobel Peace Prize. The Trump also, the way everything in Iran, Russia. I mean, we're not going to get. Those of you
Yeah.
that follow me know how I've been, breaking all of that down. But it's interesting to see the timing of that and to see if maybe because now we see today also Trump now getting involved in Brazilian
Yeah.
elections, threatening them the same way he threatened Israel, basically with financial, money by, going after his friends, Junior Trump models. So tell me a little bit more about Epstein. Tell us, because I'm curious to try to connect to that. See
About
who
Epstein
he's
and
talking
Israel. Um, I mean, I think that I could tell you a lot about Epstein and Israel. I mean, it is interesting that Bibi Netanyahu was here on the time, at the exact minute, at the exact hour, as this announcement that suddenly there was no interest in pursuing anything with Epstein. That seems to me more than coincidental, especially knowing what I know about his history. The most notable things about Epstein, and by the way, I have tomorrow night, people will be able to hear this for themselves. I have Hoffenberg, who on the record told me that Epstein worked for the Israelis. And I have Ari Ben-Manashi, who's a former senior intelligence guy from the Israelis, also on the record saying he worked for Israeli intelligence. I was there when Maxwell tried to recruit him for Israeli intelligence. And I was there, and he describes the whole moment when that happened with Ghislaine Maxwell was there as well. It happened in London during the Iran-Contra affair that were trying to smuggle weapons, not smuggle, sell weapons to the Iranians. So this is a first-hand account, the kind of which you can't really dispute, or at least get very, different kind of reads from, because most of the people are dead who are involved in that moment. This is one of the last living figures that we have. And he says, he was there when Maxwell said that the Israelis had wanted to hire Epstein. And even though Ari Ben-Manashi didn't approve of it, they landed up ultimately later working for Israeli military intelligence. Not Mossad, by the way. Everyone says Mossad, but it's Israeli military intelligence.
Has anybody came out and debunked it and said no, that didn't happen?
No. In fact, it's been 6 years since I put this out, and I had a lot of heat about my reporting, just personally, people attacking my credibility and a whole bunch of other things. But no one ever actually came after the facts, because the facts I think are too hard to dispute. Look, he had Ehud Barak, the former Israeli prime minister, was a regular visitor at Epstein's mansion in New York, where he was receiving, dirt. He was receiving compromat, basically, on all the people that he was going to have meetings with, and understanding the whole setting there. So there's all these pictures of Ehud Barak wrapped up in a scarf and trying to look like he's, sneaking into this mansion. But of course, he's a former Israeli prime minister. It's hard to avoid him. What else would the former Israeli prime minister need to be doing in Jeffrey Epstein's house, on a regular basis, like every single time he came to New York? The surveillance equipment inside Epstein's home. I mean, there's so much surveillance equipment, some of which came from the Israeli defense, the Israeli military intelligence. And it's one of the things that Epstein really liked is getting all this surveillance equipment. But what would you need that for unless you were conducting espionage operations or trying to blackmail people? You wouldn't need any of this stuff unless you were trying to hold something against other people. So, the fact that he was a spy, it's sort of obvious when you look around, but there was also one big financial deal that he had with Carbine. And his relationship with Ehud Barak, by the way, involved money as well. Like he'd give him millions of dollars at a time, and maybe he hadn't.
Let me ask you this
Yeah.
question before we go.
Yeah.
In your investigative reporting, did you
Yeah.
get any names of any of these that you or anybody that they gave money to, or that he got dirt on, or that were targeted, or were?
So was there any blackmail per se? I have not. The times I'd heard about blackmail per se was involving Governor Richardson out of New Mexico, and George Mitchell. Those are the two people that I kept hearing over and over again had been compromised and had been influenced by their choices. Now, it's not money that they were looking for. I don't think that they were looking for money in any of these cases. I think they were looking for policy support or leniency on certain issues or favoritism in negotiations. But they would use it to say, George Mitchell, as you're negotiating. I don't know what he was doing in the Middle East at the time, but there was, he did Ireland and he did something else. Um, that they wanted a certain position. They'd use that information to get certain positions or to get certain Congress people to vote a certain way in the House or the Senate. So I don't think it was a money situation, but I also don't think it needed to be very out there. I think maybe they just knew that they had this compromise about them. I mean, when you think about the effort they went to with Prince Andrew to compromise Prince Andrew, that really expensive operation to hire this young woman to fly out to London, to stay there for the weekend, to compromise him, and she herself, Virginia Giffrey, described it as Epstein wanted to have something on all these people. He wanted to have, some sort of compromise, really, on all his friends. And that's why they did what they did. And that's why Giffrey said in her affidavits why they did what they did. So, I don't think that there's evidence of an actual blackmail event. And that weakens that case. On the other hand, everything about the whole setup, the young women, Ari Ben-Manashi explained to me that the reason why they were underage women, of course, is you could sleep with anybody and it would be maybe embarrassing. But if you slept with someone who's underage, it's a crime. And so they tried to find women who were just underage. So they would be technically committing a crime, even though they wouldn't be, they wouldn't be like very, very young. They would tend to be like in the 16 or whatever, as close to the age of consent, wherever they were. And it was all about just getting these people to technically commit the crime. And that's all they needed at the time.
So some of these people didn't know that they were actually committing a crime, even though these were young girls. They did not know they were underage. They thought that they might just be young. Is that what you're saying? I mean,
I think in some cases that would have been the case, and a lot of the times they weren't Look, a lot of the women weren't underage, but some of them were, and those were specifically targeted at certain people. In Andrew's case, I think they told him the second time she met him, not the first time. She said, "Oh, by the way, I was 17 or 16, whatever it was." And this explains a lot of, and Alex Acosta as well used to say, he was told to stay away from Epstein because Epstein was part of intelligence. And Alex Acosta was the prosecutor at the time in the Epstein case, later became the labor secretary under Trump in the first administration. But, his understanding was that he couldn't prosecute this guy because this guy was part of espionage. And there's a lot of instances where that's just the case. Now, why Israeli espionage? There's this company called Carbon. Carbon was a company that allowed 911 call stations, police stations, to be able to start looking into your cell phone from the second you call them. It's an Israeli Defense Force company that featured many interesting investors. Among them was Jeffrey Epstein, and the other one was Peter Thiel, which is interesting because Peter Thiel and Jeffrey Epstein also had an interesting relationship, $170 million investment at the end of the day. And also Eric Prince's number two person from his company was also part of this company. But that Carbon company it's Carbyne, by the way, was birthed out of the unit 8200, the Israeli 8200 unit, Israeli Defense Force unit, and it was sort of a front. But for the fact that Epstein, after his charges, was allowed to even participate in a company like this as an investor, is another indicator that they considered him part of the intelligence world. This was their he was their guy, and so was Ghislaine, I think, and so was Ghislaine's dad. Robert Maxwell was part of Israeli intelligence as well. So there's all this stuff that you can sort of argue your way around this, as you pointed out. You see someone's out in the rain and they're wet. Boy, I mean, it's hard to see how it could be any other country and any other role that he was playing when you've got all this sourcing, all this information, and then all the motive to do it.
Well, it's interesting you just mentioned Gillian also, that she was part of that. So she was part of any intelligence. Is this part of the role? Just keep quiet and you go to prison here and do whatever it is because I can't imagine her being an intelligence officer to that degree. Or maybe she is. Again, I don't know. I'm more interested in what you think from your reporting. Is she that diehard where she's a hardcore officer, is spy spy, or was she just, daddy's girl, had these contacts? Because the way I understood it was she was the link between, Maxwell and what's his name?
Uh,
Epstein, and it passed on like the baton basically, and the
yeah,
contacts.
that's is a little bit, it's interesting. Look, Ghislaine and Jeffrey were both considered assets. They weren't considered agents.
That's
Um,
that's a great, and maybe you could tell
yeah.
our subscribers the difference because it's important.
An agent is a sort of someone who's actually working directly for the spy agencies, and they're really going out there and doing, spy stuff.
And they're taught properly. They're taught how to do it.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
they go through a school, a special school.
And Epstein did go through a different kind of training for many years actually, and under Robert Maxwell as well. But his specialty was financial crimes and compromise. Those are the two things and arms deals actually. Those are the three things that he sort of specialized in. So that was the projects he was given was that kind of stuff. She too was also, she was Robert's Maxwell's like most beloved of children, and when he died, she was there hiding all the documents, removing all the documents. She was the one who handled the whole death. And I'm told, and I never said this publicly because I've just never had a chance to report this, but I'll say it now that Jeffrey Epstein was there at the time of Robert Maxwell's death. And in fact, I'm told, and again, I'll say I haven't confirmed this, but it was a good source who said that Epstein was involved in trying to figure out the financial arrangement at the end of Maxwell's death. The Israelis had suddenly wanted their money back, and he had to steal the money. He did end up stealing the money from the Murrah pension fund in order to pay the Israelis back, because he'd kept all the proceeds from the Iran-Contra affair for himself. But it was Epstein, who's such a financial whiz, who was helping negotiate that. And that they met, actually, even though publicly the story is told that they only met in the 90s in the United States, they met 10 years earlier, Jeffrey and Ghislaine. And they started their friendship or romance 10 years earlier in 1980 in the UK when they were doing Iran-Contra. So, their story is much more intricate and much more lengthy. And the whole plan to take over Robert Maxwell's empire was a plan. It was hatched by a guy named Lease is his last name. I can't remember his first name. It'll come to me in a second. Douglas Lease. And Douglas Lease was an arms trader for the Queen. And somehow Epstein worked for him during the Al Yamana arms deals that they conducted. And it was his idea, Lisa's idea, I'm told, to basically construct this whole hierarchy, or not hierarchy, this passing on of the Maxwell espionage business to Epstein and Ghislaine. And that's why when they arrived in New York, that was already part of the plan. I suspect they also got a lot of the money from Robert Maxwell. I think they got a lot of money. He died apparently bankrupt, but I don't think he was really bankrupt. I think they got the money.
Wow, interesting. I mean, folks, time flies quickly
Oh my God, yeah.
when you have such information. I want to, before we have a little bit more time to go. I'm curious to hear a little bit more stuff before we, it's a good time right now. We have a little over 900, close to 1,000 of followers, of viewers right now. I want to make sure everybody goes subscribes to Zev, because he has a lot more that he's going to be talking about tomorrow. I guess he's on his show. He's going to be breaking some more information, some of the stuff that you're hearing here, just like on my platform, and that's why we're doing this together. Is the media doesn't talk about the stuff, they don't report it, you don't hear it, nobody's reporting on it, and that's why we're making sure that we keep the spotlight and keep you informed. So please make sure you subscribe. Make sure, or if you subscribe to me, definitely subscribe to Zev and follow him, because he's done a lot of great work, not only when it comes to Epstein, but also when it comes to Russia, a lot of the connections they do. Because like I tell you, when I have free time, I'm always jumping in, watching what him, Dean, Olga, what they're doing, because they're constantly talking about. So definitely.
And I'm sure there's some of these subscribers here tonight also from Narativ. And so if anyone, if you don't, I'm sure everyone subscribes to you because you're like the guy. You're the hit guy. Are you number one or number two, I see, in the world news? Can you believe that, Lev?
It's incredible. I mean,
It's
it's I can't. If somebody would
yeah,
have told me a few months ago, it's because this community has become more than a community. We're a family.
yeah,
We become a movement, and that's why each and every one of them, God bless them, because they're really. We're really people come here because there's a lot of different platforms on Substack.
yeah.
Most of them are for. I call waste of time, not just on Substack, on a lot of platforms, because they're more just, they regurgitate a lot of the same. They're talk shows, they're reality shows, they're people interact. And you like the voice of somebody, or you like the way they comment on stuff. We don't do that. We're
Yeah.
really going out there and trying to save our democracy by exposing the corruption, speaking truth to power. And a lot of the subscribers, I could tell you, they're out there doing the same thing. They're out there spreading the voices. They're going into different chat rooms. They're spreading the message, and it's working. We're
It's been
seeing.
such a revelation to me. I mean, having spent so many years on Twitter and and what a cesspool that is, and then to arrive at Substack and to have these conversations with people that you've admired for so long, like yourself, and just do it in such an informal way where you're just you're in someone's home and there's no fancy bells and whistles, there's no graphics or whatever. It's just two people having a conversation, and then to be able to have this incredible community. This is an amazing community of people that is out here on Substack. They are so smart and so caring and so supportive. It's almost like you have to shake yourself sometimes because you're like, where am I? There's so much love and care for democracy and care for America. And it rings true in every one of the people that I work with. Everyone's got so much dedication to the task. I mean, you, Olga, Dean, you work all the time. I'm just like blown away about how much effort and hours you put in to this goal. And what it's doing is creating this network, this incredible, powerful network of people that are connected to each other as subscribers or as creators, but we're all so connected and discovering each other and in a way that no other social network has done. And Hamish
I agree.
McKenzie and has done a really great job, both the founders of Substack, but the community here is just amazing, just sensational. They really outdo themselves every time you mention something. Everyone who knows Substack knows it's a great place to be, right? It's like it's one of these very blessed places. So we're very lucky to have this platform available to us at this time when the mainstream media is just giving us,
Oh, they're gone.
nonsense.
They're gone. Yeah, there
Yeah.
is no mainstream media, and I'll just tell you this much. That's why it's so important. And I sound like a broken record, but I tell my subscribers every day. They know our job is to grow as quick as possible and as big as possible, because I'm hearing and I know it. Trump is going to come after Substack eventually.
Oh,
I
you
mean,
will.
eventually he's going to try to shut up. He's already going after, I mean, different platforms. That's why they're echo chambers, and that's why you don't have the same what's it called, the freedom of speech, for our First Amendment right that he
Yeah.
tries to shut down all the time. But I agree with you, and that's why, like I said, a lot of these places you go, like X and stuff, not only are they echo chambers, but it's more of like reality show, Jerry Springer screaming, arguing, I'm saying to you, end of the day, nothing gets done. I used to go there because I always said to myself, if I could get one person to switch over to from MAGA into the good side, I feel like I've done something good. But here on Substack, you're right. It's refreshing because majority of the people here really care about their country, and majority of people that even are not from America care about their world, because what's going on is not just in America. We're seeing the Middle East on fire. We see
Mm.
Eastern Europe blowing up every day. Now we're going into South America, Mexico. I mean, he's going after Canada. He's going after Green. I
Yeah.
mean, the whole world is, if you take a look at it, just overall is on fire. So I definitely we thank everybody for support, for coming here. Why don't you get the final word and tell us what is it you got coming up, and what do
Well,
you think is important with the Epstein stuff?
Well, let me just underline what you said earlier. This is this topic that can actually break up MAGA. This is this if the right information gets to the right hands, and really the information that needs to get to them is that Donald Trump was involved in in a very similar network of people that Epstein was involved in terms of the financial crimes and these other crimes. And socially, we know that he was very connected to him through all the video and other things that we have. But what we're going to be presenting over the next week is not only were they both involved with intelligence agencies, uh, Trump through the KGB from the 1980s, and Epstein through the Israel. We know that both of those countries' intelligence agencies also collaborate with each other. And so a lot of what we're seeing impacting our world today, whether it's what's happening in Ukraine with weapons being withheld or any other major world event, it's really being influenced by those two countries, Israel and Russia, in a lot of the times. And these two guys are very influenced, or were very influenced by these two intelligence groups that work very closely with each other. And I just would, remind everyone that this is America. This is not Israel, and it's not Russia. And yet there's a hold over these leaders. And the hold that they have is not only sexual compromise, it's also financial. At the end of the day, Epstein got a lot of money from the Israelis whenever he needed it. And the Russians gave Trump a lot of money whenever he needed it in order to come out of his many bankruptcies and all of that. And that's the whole. These guys are beholden to Putin. They're beholden to Netanyahu. And we can't have the leader of America, the leader of this great nation, this free country in the world, being beholden to an autocrat. I mean, it's just, that's what MAGA needs to see and hear, that there is a long track record of this. And so tomorrow night at 9 p.m., it's 6 years to the day and the hour since we first broadcast The Secret Life of Jeffrey Epstein. I look like 10 years younger, 20 years younger, I don't know. But this job ages you. But it's a rough show, but the information you'll get in these shows is the full spectrum of how he's a spy, how they blackmailed people, and the fact that they worked for the Israelis, and also their financial entanglements. So that's the show tomorrow.
I can't wait to. I'm going to definitely be watching to make sure to see, because the major takeaway from tonight that I want each and every one of you to take home is what Zev just said, and I love it. The Zev, Lev, it's like tomato, potato, potato. So it's incredible. We should definitely have a show together.
Yeah, we should. It's very fun.
Zev Lev show. But the key that I want you to take away from today is that this is huge for Mega. This is a moment where it doesn't matter. Don't concentrate too much what's in the files. There might not be the biggest, bombshell of there where a picture or a video of Donald Trump in a compromising position. That's okay. Because the fact that he's not going to go back. See, the beauty of it, Donald Trump put himself in a corner right now in his own world. And because of the way they came out and said that there's nothing there. It's not that they said they stopped to look. They said case closed.
Yeah, so ridiculous. It's a cover-up. That's what makes it a cover-up.
Exactly. And even in their own MAGA base sees that it's a cover-up.
Yeah.
They know it's a cover-up, and that's why this is not going away. And we're not going to let it go away, even though the media is already shifting, but we're not going to. So make sure. But before you go, Zev, I want to share something with all of my subscribers. I have some very happy news a little bit today that I want to share. And since you're with us, I want to share it with you also. So a little earlier today, while I was doing my show Unleash with Michael and Malcolm, I got an email from this group. It's the group is called where are they? The Whistleblower. It's the Whistleblower Association of Washington D.C. Summit. They've been around for 13 years, and they sent me a telling Mr. Parnas, this year we would like to award you the prestigious Pillar Award.
Wow.
It's going to be awarded to also Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse.
Oh, wow.
And also Jerry Ashton, the co-founder of a medical debt company, and yourself for your extraordinary political courage. Telling the truth is a thankless task. Many people face some of the most form of retaliation as a result. While we cannot undo the harm whistleblowers face, we do intend to bring awareness to the good that comes from their courage. Truth tellers deserve recognition, and we use the prestigious Pillar Award to recognize their exceptional bravery. And the Pillar Award that I found out today was amazing. The first Pillar Award was named after Frank Pillar. He was the security guard who foiled the break-in at the Democratic National Committee in Washington, D.C. during the Watergate Hotel in 1972.
Wow. What an honor.
Yes,
That is incredible. And the company you're getting presented there with are remarkable people. I mean, they're just among the very best, and you deserve it. You know,
thank you.
everything I've seen of your work has been so heartfelt, and you've really shown the world that you can transform, and how was easily you were able to do it. I don't know if it was that easy, but you've been able to show a beautiful transformation, and that's a very hard thing to show. And the work you do is exemplary, and the amount of hours and dedication you have for it is really, really amazing. So, it's an honor to get to know you, and I really appreciate your work so much. So, I'm glad you're getting that award. You deserve it.
I appreciate that. And I'm happy to have you here on a day that I'm sharing it with all of my Substack subscribers. Guys, again, make sure you go out there, subscribe. Make sure you go out there, get 4 people, bring them to our platform. Make sure they subscribe to Zev, subscribe to me. Make sure you pass what you heard today. The media is not going to talk about. Nobody else of the pundits are talking about this. So make sure you go. You restack it, retweet it. You send it far and wide and make sure everybody hears, because you are our megaphone. You are an extension of our voices, because that's what we're here. So thank you guys. Have a great night and stay tuned. I have a Substack letter coming out later today with the letter and some of the stuff that we spoke about. And if you missed it, there's a lot that I'm going to coming down the pipe. So definitely subscribe, and I'll see you guys. Have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow, Zev. I look forward to seeing that your investigative work.
Thank you so much, Lev. Thanks for having me on the show. Thanks. Bye, everybody. Have a great
Bye-bye.
evening.